received messages from some of you about the crypto crash over the past 24 hours and my thoughts on it. I don't really have much detail to add because I've talked about at length in I think 3 or 4 videos, which you can currently find on my IGTV and on YouTube. But I guess if I were to say anything in sum, it would be that I don't think that the dramatic crash that we saw is really that surprising or that unnatural towards the current situation. And the reason being because I think that the overall valuation of the crypto market at the moment is extremely bubble-like in terms of just how detached it is from the reality of the current development of many of these cryptocurrencies in terms of their underlying fundamentals, in terms of their market penetration, adoption and maturity, in terms of the utility, and in terms of, if at all, the realization of, if any, existing intrinsic value. Yet despite the current level of development for many of these cryptocurrencies, the valuation has skyrocketed and has ballooned and ballooned and ballooned this year. And that is also confluenced by this very interesting development where this year, and also largely last year, really the onset of the pandemic, has brought with it an influx of retail investors, lay people who have pursued the crypto market and its investments, largely chasing the price development without really looking at the underlying fundamentals I just talked about. Perhaps they've not even looked into the thesis of many of these cryptos that they're currently investing on, or the white paper, or really the underlying technologies. They are largely driven by speculation, by hype, and by all forms of irrationalities, as we have seen over the past couple of months. When you add both of these two together, you really have a situation where the valuation of crypto is extremely volatile and also extremely irrational, where it could excessively skyrocket and abruptly go bust and bust dramatically. And of course, as many of these excessive and disproportionate valuation is created, it cannot offset the reality of many challenges that cryptocurrencies face in its development in the market, for example, regulation, and also the real economic forces that would also influence and challenge these currencies themselves. Not to mention, of course, the hype and the sort of hype culture that surrounds the current price, which really appeals to these new money investors that I'm talking about. So busts like these will happen again and again, perhaps even more extreme and dramatically in the coming times. Those that have actually gone in with a short-term window and they've really gamed on the speculation and they expect to make quick gain. And of course, these random and unpredictable busts happens, then their positions can get destroyed, whether they realize that loss or not, whether they have a stop loss. Even if they don't, there's an opportunity cost that's involved. At the same time, for many of the people who are supposedly holding out onto their dear lives, in long-term belief of some of these cryptos, certainly they might be right. But at the same time, these things I've mentioned, where we really have to analyze it, becomes ever more important. If we are planning to go long on some of these cryptocurrencies, we certainly have to really analyze the fundamentals behind them and also really analyze the current development to really review whether many of these cryptos at the moment are undervalued. We have to put aside the narrative of the excessive valuation right now to really come to a conclusion of our own to see whether any of these we're looking at are currently undervalued and potentially they hold great value in the long term. At the same time, we also have to go into details of the challenges of the fundamentals of crypto developments overall in the market and economy. So no matter how you see it, I think, especially now where there's this overall culture, irrationality, hype, and these exaggerated market sentiments, we have to be very level-headed, very analytical and critical of the narrative that's being told. I think cryptocurrencies have a lot of potential, especially the underlying technologies. But at the same time, it is such a new technology. It is an emerging technology with a lot of hype that surrounds it. And the recent trading culture, investing culture that surrounds it has actually distracted us from the underlying narrative that's going on. I think the ones that will really win in the long-term game of cryptos are the ones that understand this. They're the ones that truly are able to analyze it well.